Hey there, and welcome back to Transformers Fall of Cybertron. So you know what I hate? I hate Transformers Rise of the Darkspark. That game frickin' sucks. I also finished playing through the entire thing a while back, which you can check out right here. But I had a thought. Why don't we compare these games directly with one another and see just how much better Fall is than Rise? We'll explore basic gameplay functions, weapons, and other design elements, and see just how they compare. So, without further ado, it is time for the Fall of Darkspark. Let's begin! Let's start by comparing basic gameplay. As we all know, in Rise, you cannot boost the second you transform. You stop a lot faster than normal, and your jump isn't quite as high. Compare that to Fall, where you can boost the second you transform. Your stop is a bit more gradual, and your jump is quite a bit higher. If you're not totally convinced, take a look at it from a jet perspective. See how sudden that stop is? It feels so unnatural. Whereas with Fall, it takes way more time to come to a complete stop. So Fall feels way better as far as basic movement goes. Moving over to a more lesser part of game design, the cutscenes. In Rise of the Darkspark, the cutscenes have terrible audio balance. As you could barely hear some characters talk. And this isn't just in the cutscenes themselves. This happens in the main game as well. But in addition to that, you cannot skip them.
Swindle, take out that enforcer. Shockwave, hold position.
Whereas with Fall, the audio levels are much better.
We need to take control of this ship. Combaticons, combine into Bruticus.
Maybe a bit too loud in some parts, but otherwise fairly audible. And you can skip them.
Bruticus online, ready for action.
I mean, seriously, when is the last time you played a game that had unskippable cutscenes? Seriously, that's just bad design, especially when some of them are ridiculously long. Speaking on the subject of voices, though, we have what is the most annoying of changes in this game, and that is the death sounds over the comm. These have to be some of the weirdest death sounds I've ever heard. Compare that to Fall. Death screams never come over the comm, and they aren't nearly as stupid sounding. To be fair, this seems to be strictly an Autobot problem, as the Con soldiers in Rise do not have this issue.
You've been ventilated.
On the subject of line delivery, though, we can likely blame this on bad direction. And one of the best demonstrations of this is with Swindle, as they have the exact same lines, but with a completely different take on delivery. Take a listen.
I'm on the move. I'm on the move. You want a good deal? You see me. You want a good deal? You see me. Time to get my hands dirty. Time to get my hands dirty. Yeah, that's what you get. Yeah, that's what you get, losers. Wheeling and dealing. Wheeling and dealing, baby.
Not only have some lines been slightly tweaked by the removal of a word, but the delivery of the lines in Rise is just so dull. Now, we all know Steve Blum is a fantastic voice actor, but bad direction can really dwindle a good performer. And this is a crystal clear example of that. Of course, alongside some bad direction, we've also gotten some very questionable voice changes. A prime example of this is Jetfire. In Rise of the Darkspark, you get this.
I read your Perceptor. I'm holding over the impact site. I used to be stationed on Triptychon, remember? I could find my way. Point taken. Well, lead the way, little buddy.
Now, I don't know why they decided to change this voice at all, but it is freaking awful. I hate this voice so much. Same actor, but the accent is completely gone. Whereas if you compare this to Fall of Cybertron...
Jetfire, launch Tomb Niner, en route! Right Autobots, let's turn and burn! Search for the pivot couplings, that's the weak link. Cables are severed, Optimus. We needn't worry about any more Decepticons crushed. Whoa!
You get that wonderful voice. And it's not the only character voiced by Troy Baker that was changed in a way. There's also Kickback.
Is it something to eat? Ooh, you won't get by me.
Now, of course, he only has a couple lines, but it is drastically different compared to...
I remember you, Grim Black. Do you remember me? Me?
Yeah. I don't know why it was just Troy's voices in particular that were switched out, but both of the ones they swapped out for are not nearly as good. I would love to know why they decided to change this. Well, we've covered voice changes. Let's talk about full-on personality changes. And that is with Blastoff.
Blastoff, we could use some air support here.
Negative. I'm not coming down there until you take care of those enforcers. I'd scratch my chrome.
Just ain't no wheeling and dealing with you, Blastoff. Fine. Hey, Blastoff, how about that air support?
Be more polite, Swindle. I only destroy Autobots by choice, not by command. Hey, Shockwave! I didn't know you were listening. I'm swooping in now. Those bridges are no more. You're clear.
Now, I don't know about you, but I never saw anything in FOC that made me think this guy didn't take his job seriously.
The Autobots must know we're coming. They keep getting in our way.
Stop right there, Decepticreeps! Keep your hands where we can see them.
Hey, Vortex, use your shockwave now!
Scrap! They're trying to cut us off from their transport.
Move it, Blastoff! Do not lose that transport!
Gonna be tight!
There was no indication in FOC that would make me think Blastoff was some sort of incompetent fool. I know he's not the most prominent character in the games, but still. Though there is one thing I can actually give Edge of Reality credit for. And that is that they actually made Starscream's weapon color blue, as opposed to it being red in FOC. I'm sure it was just an oversight with FOC, but still, I'm actually impressed that Edge decided to fix that up. So, I'll give them a point for that. Well, I think that's all for the basic gameplay elements I can think of. Let's now turn our attention to weapons. While the primary weapons have pretty much the same upgrades as they did in FOC, the heavy weapons have received 2 additional upgrades each. I can't believe I didn't notice that, but they have. Before we get to that though, we'll test through the primary weapons and see just how they compare between games. Starting with the Neutron Assault Rifle. This weapon has the same 4 upgrades that it had in FOC, so we'll just get straight to the test.
More Decepticons! High left! Here, deal with it! You can't hide forever!
As far as I am able to tell, the weapon seems about the same between games. Nothing feels too weak or too powerful. It feels about the same. Up next, we have the Path Blaster, which again has the same 4 upgrades that it had in FOC. So again, we'll just hop straight in game and try it out.
More Decepticons! High left!
What a throw!
Here's a message straight from Megatron! Enemy is off scope!
And again, the weapons feel pretty much the same. And that, I don't like the weapon in both games. It feels pretty weak. The Gambler is a great addition in both games, but aside from that, the weapon feels pretty poor. Not one of my favorites. Up next, we have the Scatter Blaster. Again, same 4 upgrades as FOC, so straight to the game we go.
He should never have challenged us. More Decepticons! High left! Can't shoot back at what you can't see.
Now, despite the fact that I would never recommend using this against standard soldiers on account of how close you have to get, it actually is a pretty powerful weapon. However, it does seem to be a bit more potent in Fall, as enemies in Rise seem to take a bit longer to take down. So that's interesting. Up next, we have the Subsonic Repeater, which actually has had an upgrade switched out. Instead of the Tachyon Transmitter we originally had in FOC, which made you faster when using Fine Aim, we now have the Amplifier Pack, which gives us more ammo in a clip. This is a change I kind of get, as the Turbo Booster kind of does the same thing, but I think that was a highlight of the Subsonic in that it made you really, really fast. So this test will be interesting.
Gotta get a better shot. Can't shoot me back? What a shame.
So, from what I can tell, I actually do prefer the additional speed boost the Tachyon Transmitter gives you. That and the weapon feels a lot more potent. Compared to Rise, the additional ammo is nice, but the weapon feels like it does so little damage that it doesn't really matter. So, I'd say the Subsonic is far superior in Fall.
But one of my talents!
Up next, we have the Photon Burst Rifle, which again has the same upgrades that it had in FOC. So straight to the battlefield we go. And while this probably isn't the best place to test this weapon, I still think it is probably one of the best weapons in the game. It's got good range, good damage, it's just all around a good weapon. And that seems to carry over to Rise as well. So yeah, this is a good weapon for both games. Up next, we have the Nucleon Charge Rifle. Now, despite the upgrades being the exact same between games, I already know for a fact this weapon sucks in Rise of the Darkspark. Let me show you why. In Fall of Cybertron, a fully charged shot will one-shot any standard enemy,
His head, didn't he?
whether it be on the head or body. Compare that to Rise, it doesn't. You will only get a fully charged one-shot kill if you hit the head. And this makes this gun so insufferable to use. Again, the gun is great in Fall, but in Rise, I hate it, because it's just not powerful enough. I don't know if the weapon was nerfed or the enemies were buffed. Up next, we have the EDK Tech Volt. Not a weapon I commonly use against Decepticons. I personally prefer to use it against Insecticons. Regardless though, the upgrades are the exact same from Fall to Rise, so we can just head in game and try it out. And there's a couple problems with this gun. First of all, despite using it against a group here, it still doesn't do a good enough amount of overall damage to be considered good. And second, considering how close you have to get to actually use it, you're just making yourself a better target for the enemy. Seriously, the closer you are to these guys, the quicker you'll be dead. This applies to Rise as well. Yeah, it just doesn't do enough damage considering the risk you're taking getting this close. It's not a good weapon in both Rise and Fall. At least for enemy soldiers. If you go against Insecticons, it'll probably work great. But for soldiers, not worth the risk. Up next, we have the Riot Cannon. Arguably what is the best primary weapon in both Fall and Rise. Now, again, the upgrades are all the same. So let's give it a test and see how it performs.
More Decepticons! High left!
This weapon is fast, efficient, and deadly. If you score those direct hits, your enemy will be down in seconds. It is a two-shot kill for standard soldiers, for both Fall and Rise, making it a wonderful weapon for both games. Yeah, honestly, there are so few occasions where you wouldn't take this, because it is just that good. Next up, we have the Throwback Blaster. So, this is interesting. In Fall of Cybertron, the Throwback Blaster was a heavy weapon. However, in Rise of the Darkspark, it is now a primary weapon. I actually have to give a point to Rise of the Darkspark for this, because this is a choice that makes sense. The Throwback Blaster just honestly doesn't seem like a heavy weapon. And between the two weapons you get for completing the campaign and the two DLC weapons, at least two of those should have been made primary weapons. So I'll give them a point for that. But, that change aside, how do they perform in-game?
He should never have challenged us! Optimus, stay near the nerve center door! Rocket all the way in!
In FOC, the weapon performs a bit better than I thought it would. I honestly thought it was a pretty awful weapon. I don't know if it got buffed somehow, but I don't remember it being this decent. Comparing that to Rise, however, it is frickin' useless! Look how long it takes to take down one enemy. It's awful! Seriously, it's frickin' terrible. Oh. Standard soldiers, this thing does like nothing. Yeah, this gun is abominable in Rise. Passable in Fall, but here, don't touch it with a 50-foot pole. Up next, we have the Electro Bolter. Just like the Throwback Blaster, this gun was originally a heavy weapon in Fall of Cybertron, but in Rise has been made to a primary weapon. Now, I could go either way here. It's a gun that would work on either weapon class, to be honest, but I like having it as a primary just so I can use it with some other great weapons. And considering how much I've used it in the campaign itself, it's pretty darn good. But let's see if it's the same between the two games. In FOC, it is a very effective long-range projectile weapon. It is a two-shot kill for standard soldiers. It does require some pretty tight aiming, but if you can pull off those shots, it's a wonderful weapon. and it is equally as effective in Rise of the Darkspark. Which makes sense because I've used it so many times. But I do love having it as a primary weapon, so I'm gonna give another point to Rise. That is all for the primary weapons. Let us now turn our attention to the heavy weapons. Now, like I said, the heavy weapons in Rise of the Darkspark have all received 2 additional upgrades. So, we can expect some distinct differences in regards to their performance. Starting with the Energon Harvester, in Fall of Cybertron, we have the R Infinity Finder and the Reaper. In Rise, however, we get the Hyper Interlink, which gives us a faster reload, and the Iron Cartridge. So we get both a faster reload and more ammo in the gun. Those are 2 additions that'll perform nicely, but let us see how the gun itself works in-game.
Optimus, stay near the nerve center door! The Autobots will triumph! Grenade! Take cover! Just need a nano-click here. Alert!
There is no doubt this gun is extremely powerful. However, it isn't very practical for dealing with hordes and hordes of enemies. It is probably more effective against a smaller amount of tougher targets. However, with the additional upgrades included in Rise of the Darkspark, it is made even more powerful. The faster reload and additional ammo in the gun really do provide some nice bonuses. So, for both games, it's an effective weapon, but in Rise, it is just a little bit better. Up next, we have the Virgin 32 Cybercorrupt At-Er. This weapon originally had the Amplifier Pack and Hyper Interlink as its upgrades in FOC. In Rise, however, we have received the Iron Cartridge Booster and the Sonic Blast. So we have more ammo in the clip, and we can fire a lot faster. Now that's great and all, but this weapon isn't really ideal for dealing with large hordes of enemies. But, you know, let's see just how it performs now.
Grenade! Come back here, you! Optimus, stay near the nerve center door!
So, granted, this is not the ideal way to use this weapon. It is much more effective against much stronger foes, but I figured it'd be a decent enough place to test it out. Well, you only get 4 shots, and it doesn't really do a whole lot for you. You know, it's fine here, I guess, but if you move over to Rise, you now have 2 shots in the clip, and you get 1 bonus shot. I mean, I guess it really isn't a contest here. Rise is superior again, just on account of how much more you can do. Up next, we have the Thermo Rocket Cannon. Now this is a weapon I know that has received some distinct differences. Our original upgrades in FOC included the Amplifier Pack and the Omega Pulse Charge. But moving over to Rise, we now get the Hyper Interlink and the Poke Beta. So we have a faster reload and a more powerful melee attack. Both very welcome additions.
Optimus, stay near the nerve center door!
Now, it is no question that in FOC, the Thermo Rocket Cannon is very effective. It one-shots any standard soldier, and it is just overall powerful in general. It takes down enemies quickly and efficiently. However, if you move this over to Rise, it becomes a true instrument of destruction. And seriously, between the fast reload and Poke Beta, this has to be one of the top heavy weapons in the game. It's just that good. Maybe a little bit OP, to be honest. But still, very good. Next up, we have the Gear Shredder. Not a weapon I use that often, but it has its moments. Well, the original FOC upgrades included the Torque Ripper and Amplifier Pack. But Rise includes the Tachyon Transmitter and Trick Shot. So that gives us faster fine aim speed, and I think Trick Shot was a multiplayer perk that gave you a higher percentage of hitting enemies. Well, besides that, there is also a slight change to how the melee attack works. We'll run through that shortly. For now, let's see how it performs.
More Decepticons! High left!
The Gear Shredder in FOC feels decent enough. It probably isn't the best for tight environments like this one, with all this cover, because I'm seeing a lot of these gears really ricocheting off and not hitting the enemy. And pay attention to this melee attack. See how it is the same as the standard melee attack for all the other weapons? Let's now move over to Rise and keep that in mind. In Rise, it feels, okay, a bit the same. It doesn't seem to track as much as I thought it would with the Trick Shot upgrade, but it does feel like it is a bit better. But if you notice melee, the attack is different. Instead of having the typical blade, there is a new sound effect that plays. It is a very interesting change to make. You know, it doesn't really throw anything off, so I guess I'm fine with it. Up next, we have the most suggestive weapon in Transformers history, the Corrosive Slime Cannon. Do I really need to explain this? No. If you know, you know. Well, speaking of upgrades, the original FOC weapon had Amplifier Pack and Sonic Blast. So, pretty typical upgrades. Okay. Rise, on the other hand, has the Cosmic Rust Disperser and Hyper Interlink. Anyway, we get a bigger goo splash and a faster reload. Okay, pretty simple stuff, but how do they compare in battle?
Autobots are here! More Decepticons! High left! They're gonna fight you dead with
In FOC, the Corrosive Slime Cannon seems to do some pretty decent damage. If you can get a good hit, of course. It's not a weapon I use very often, but from what I see here, it seems to perform well enough. Comparing that to Rise, it feels maybe just a tidbit weaker. Not by much, but it doesn't feel quite as strong as it was in FOC. Otherwise, those two upgrades don't seem to make too much of a difference here, so feels about the same, but slightly worse in Rise. Up next, we have the Chaos Rift Combustor. Again, not a weapon I use very often, but from what I've seen, it does have its uses. Well, for upgrades, we originally had the Hyper Interlink and Cyberthermic Frag. Moving over to Rise, though, we get the addition of Amplifier Pack and Chaos Fuse. So we can hold more ammo, and I think Chaos Fuse was a multiplayer perk, but I can't exactly recall what it did. I'll include a text description here. So, slightly different, but let's see just how it performs in battle. From what I am able to tell, the Rift Combustor does feel quite powerful, if you can get the hits. You don't have a lot of shots to fire, so you better not miss. It is likely more effective against larger groups than single units, so it'd probably do great for something like the Insecticons. Moving over to Rise, though, it feels about the same, but the fact that you get quite a bit more ammo is a nice addition. It might feel just a slight bit weaker compared to FOC, but I can't say that for certain. Either way, it is a bit more potent in Rise just because you have a bit more ammo to work with, so I guess I'll give this to Rise. Up next, we have the X-18 Scrap Maker. Our original upgrades in FOC included the Cyber Optics and Iron Cartridge. Moving over to Rise, though, we get Drop Shot and Energon Rush. Well, Drop Shot is the quicker wind-up time, but Energon Rush? I'm not sure what that is. Well, I'll tell you from experience that either way, this weapon is great in both games. One of the best.
Keep them away from the nerve center.
What can I say? This weapon just feels tough. It's got the firepower, it's got the damage. It's just an all-around good weapon. Just made even better in Rise. The faster wind-up time just makes a good weapon better. Yeah, this is another true instrument of destruction. Right up there with the rocket launcher. Very good, can't go wrong with it. Next, we have the A4 Pulsar Cannon. This is a weapon I don't like very much, and I'll get into why in a bit. But our original upgrades include the Transwarp Ballistics and Cyberthermic Frag. Now, for Rise, we get the Iron Cartridge and Hyper Interlink. So 2 basic upgrades, faster reload and more ammo in the clip. Okay, that's great, but how do they perform in-game? Well, you'll see for yourself.
He's around here somewhere. Optimus, stay near the nerve center door. I'm gonna deactivate you, knives. More Decepticons, high left. He's around here somewhere.
Yeah, this thing just feels weak. It doesn't even one-shot a soldier. I figured this would be like the Magma Frag Launcher back in WFC, which was pretty much a one-shot on a standard soldier, but this, it's slow, its blast radius is small, and it feels weak. I do not like this gun. Might be one of my least favorites in the entire game.
I take no satisfaction from this.
I just don't like it. Moving over to Rise, though, it is just as bad. Honestly, the 2 upgrades you get don't really make it that much better. It's just still, in general, weak. That blast radius is so small, and the damage is so little. I just don't like it. This is not a good weapon. Way too weak. Up next, we have the first of the unlockable weapons, the Glass Gas Cannon. Oh boy, is this thing good. Powerful, good range, just all-around phenomenal weapon. Contrary to the Throwback and Electro Bolter, this weapon is a heavy weapon in both Fall and Rise. So nothing different to mention on that count, and since there are no upgrades to mention, we can just test them out in-game and see how they perform.
Optimus, stay near the nerve center door. Grenades, Doc! They're here! Autobots are here! More Decepticons, high left!
And the answer to both? Extremely well. This weapon will one-shot any standard soldier and has a pretty decent blast radius. Oh, this thing is just glorious.
Keep them away from the nerve center.
What a wonderful weapon. What can I say? There's nothing really to complain about. It is potent and powerful in both games. I pretty much recommend taking it anywhere. It is just that good. And finally, closing it off with the last unlockable weapon, we have the Slingshot. This one surprised me. Well, once again, it is a heavy weapon in both Fall and Rise, and there are no upgrades to mention. So all we need to do and show it off in game and see if they differ at all. Now, I have to admit that I'm a bit speechless here, because this weapon is performing terribly. 3 shots to kill a standard soldier. Now, maybe I'm crazy, but did this get nerfed somehow? Because I think I would remember if this weapon was this bad. And this is just bizarre, but it is performing horribly. And I don't know why. Maybe there were some changes server side, but this feels really bad.
Barbaric but effective.
Comparing that to Rise, however, it is a absolute thing of beauty. It is a one-shot kill. It has a decent blast radius. It just feels like an unstoppable force of nature. It's wonderful here. Why is it so freaking poor in Fall? I swear I would know if this thing was actually that bad. I'm gonna look into it. But yeah, as it stands right now, phenomenal in Rise, freaking trash in Fall. Alright, and there we have it. A detailed comparison between Fall of Cybertron and Rise of the Darkspark. So I'd say overall, while there were a few, tiny few things that Rise of the Darkspark did slightly better than Fall, overall, Fall is just a better game. The basic game design elements that Rise just fails at just can't make up for anything, really. Fall is just better designed in pretty much every way. Edge only gets a few points for a few slight fixes, and that isn't enough to save a trash game. Well, I hope I've all made you hate Rise of the Darkspark just a little more. If I did, I consider this video a complete win. And I'm sure there's a lot more I could run through, but I'll leave this here for now. I hope you all found this insightful and intriguing. What other bits did Rise fail at? Let me know down below. Well, that'll do it for this little run through. I will see you next time with something else. Goodbye!